Welcome back to Life with the Spectrum. I'm your host, Gina Cavalli. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever heard of the program Gnets? Probably not. What about segregated classrooms? Yeah, that was from back in the day. And now I'm sure you've heard of inclusive classrooms. But what if your son or daughter is in a Gnets program and you don't even know about it? Here with me today, Leslie Lipson, attorney with Lipson Advocacy and the director of the GCEE. How you doing, Leslie? Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Gina, so much for having me.
You know, when you got into law school, what made you choose this kind of path?
So, as a person, I have hidden disabilities myself. I always wanted to go into the field of disability civil rights, and I actually interned in this field twice while I was in law school. And so I've been working since, I guess, 1999 in the field.
Wow. And now you had another job. You were the director of outreach at the GAO, right? What was that all about?
So at the Georgia Advocacy Office, I had a lot of different roles. Part of outreach was definitely seeing what people need. And also in that work, we were seeking out people with disabilities that experienced abuse and neglect because of their disability and making sure that folks were able to be connected with other people to help them enforce their civil rights.
And now you're the director at the GCEE. All these acronyms here.
A lot of initials,
right?
yeah.
What does that stand for?
That's the Georgia Coalition for Equity in Education. And this work is something that was kind of incubated at the Georgia Advocacy Office and is a cross-sectional group of child-serving professional folks and parents and stakeholders who believe that we need to be aggressively seeking educational equity in Georgia, which sounds real pretty, but is real hard.
I was going to ask you, what are we seeing progress in and what do we need help in?
I mean, well, we knew all the cracks were there pre-COVID pandemic and COVID shutdown, but what it did was really highlight a lot of the gaps that already existed. And so there definitely are, some people call it an achievement gap, but we don't call it an achievement gap. We call it an instructional gap. When you call it an achievement gap, it sounds like you're blaming kids for not learning. But we call it an instructional gap because a lot of times different kids have very different access to instruction, depending on assumptions teachers might have about them, depending on how a school is structured, depending on how much money that school has, depending on the staffing that school has. And so it can really change a kid's entire school experience based on instruction. So we saw big impacts from that on COVID. We see a lot of kind of practices within education that are like old practices that have been around forever that aren't like evidence-based practices.
Right.
And those usually disproportionately impact kids that are marginalized, so kids with disabilities, kids of color, kids who are LGBTQIA, kids who may speak English as a second language, and I could keep on going on with different vulnerable groups. That was not an exhaustive list, but a lot of these things significantly disproportionately impact those students.
So part of your role as the director now at the GCEE, do you go to the state floor? Do you go and you lobby for better ways to do this, that, or the other? I mean, what do you do?
So I haven't done much lobbying in this role in this way.
Okay.
But I think that's a possibility. If anybody out there would like, me to be involved in that, or you see a specific role for the Georgia Coalition for Equity Education, I'm interested. But I oftentimes see myself as kind of an inverse triangle, and I'm the bottom, and then families of kids with disabilities and other community advocates who need information or research or help with framing, I'm that kind of person.
Got it.
So Gina, if you wanted to go talk to the legislature, I would be happy to work with you on your talking points, get you comfortable, help you, be succinct. Like even that thing we just did with the instruction gap versus the achievement gap. I think those kinds of
right.
Those kinds of flips are really important. And so I don't mind like talking in front of people. I'm not shy by any means, but I think my professional role is to bring forth other voices.
Sitting with me today, Leslie Lipson, attorney with Lipson Advocacy and the director of the GCEE. When we get back, we're going to talk about something called Gnets. What are they? The good, the bad, and the ugly. All coming up. Stay with me.
Life with the Spectrum would like to thank our friends at Don's Tree Service. Mention that you heard it here and get 10% off. 770-413-TREE. If you'd like to have your business name here, reach us at gcast.com.
Welcome back to Life with the Spectrum. I'm your host, Gina Cavalli. With me today, attorney Leslie Lipson with Lipson Advocacy, and you are also the director of the GCEE. Leslie, I heard this word called Gnets. I didn't know anything about it. And if I don't know anything about it, which is rare, in this crazy world, then I know other people don't know about it. And I know it affects so many students. Would you please care to share the good, the bad, the ugly with this?
So I'm not surprised you don't know about Gnets. We call it the shadow system of education in our state. So if you are a Georgia taxpayer, there is a system called the Gnets, the Georgia Network for Educational and Therapeutic Supports. And if you could see my hands when I did this, I did air quotes because it is rarely educational and definitely not therapeutic.
Okay.
It is a wholly segregated school system in Georgia that the state of Georgia has been funding since 1973.
What?
And there currently are 2 lawsuits against this system. We're the only state in the nation, to my knowledge, that has this system. And I've been involved in trying to make sure this system is obsolete for a long time. My whole career has pretty much been.
What is it? What is, the segregation of students? Is this program?
So basically, if you have a behavior-related disability, or you have needs for behavioral supports based on your disability, generally, you're at risk for going into these Gnets programs. They are located, some of them were formerly, until we got a report published and the state quickly changed this, but some of them were formerly located in schools that were allocated to Black folk during the Jim Crow era. So those schools got shut down, and then they opened up those buildings and put Gnets in them. Besides, in North Georgia,
my mind is going poof.
It should. And the Department of Justice, this isn't like life according to Leslie Lipson. This is not just my anecdotal information, but, we can definitely, if you go to the GCE website, we have the links to the Department of Justice letter of investigation and into the pleadings and all the investigative work around this. Now, as advocates and parents have pointed out problems, the state has tried to kind of scurry and fix things. But the truth of the matter is, and if you're a parent who has a kid with needs any behavioral support, and most of us do, then you need it at your neighborhood school.
Right.
You need it where your kid is located. So these schools, and there's not schools, by the way, they're like programs. They're oftentimes located at a far bus trip. It's not where your siblings went to school. It's not like your neighborhood school. And you're surrounded totally by other kids with pretty significant behavioral support needs. And I have yet to see any research that says that kids learn better emotional regulation or better social skills being surrounded by lots of kids that don't have good emotional regulation or good social skills. Right? We know this.
Right.
You don't need your doctorate, right? Are you Dr. Gina? You don't need a doctorate to know that.
Yeah, the peer-to-peer interaction is not going to go well in this kind of program.
And you might have trouble retaining teachers, right?
Right.
Because that would be hard. It'd be hard. And so these programs have existed a long time. They're a shadow system because they're not schools, so they're not covered under No Child Left Behind. And a lot of parents don't even know when their kids get sent there. They don't even know what it is.
So that's what I'm asking. So here's the question. So here I have a child behaviorally just distraught. I'm a woman of color, and now they're telling me that my child needs to go.
They have a special place for special kids.
And yet they don't explain to me that really they're kind of segregating my child, and he will or she will fall through the cracks.
Interestingly, your unconscious immediately put he, because these programs are massively male and massively Black kids. So when we started this litigation and this investigative work is about 5,000 kids, and now it's about down to 3,000 kids, which is still 3,000 kids too many.
I can't believe we live in 2023, Leslie, and this is going on in the state of Georgia. Like, I know Kemp knows about it. I'm just going up the ladder of people. Like, how do we stop this, eliminate it? Like, what do we need to do? And parents who've been told this, where can they go? What do they do?
So if your kid is currently stuck in a Gnets, there are 3,000 kids in Gnets, and if your kid is currently stuck in a Gnets, you can definitely call the Georgia Advocacy Office. You can definitely reach out to me, and I can help you find advocacy resources. If you're interested in being involved in like the stakeholder work and the hopefully a sea change that will make sure we have better behavioral support services located in our neighborhood schools, then join the Georgia Coalition for Equity in Education. That's definitely a major focus of our work. And I think for parents, I mean, one thing they can do is if you do go and Google just Gnets, if the school told you that they were trying to change a kid's placement to a Gnets, you will pull up work about the litigation. You'll pull up articles in the New Yorker and the Washington Post and MSNBC. Like, there is good media out on it, but you might not know because the names of these schools are like Shadow Rock and all these like Crossroads Academy, or I don't know why they're always named Crossroads, or like Second Chance. You know, they're all these kind of like alternative-y school names. So you might just Google that and you might not realize that it's a Gnets. And that's not parents' fault.
Wow.
But
I bet minds right now watching this and listening to this are going poof, 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 because this is crazy. You know, Leslie, stay with me because I want to talk to you about what parents are coming to you most about here through your advocacy and your law firm. Hold on.
I'm Lyra Gillenwaters. Thanks for checking out this episode of Life with the Spectrum. If you subscribe to the channel, you'll always see the newest episodes when they come out.
Welcome back to Life with the Spectrum. I'm your host, Gina Cavalli. With me today, attorney Leslie Lipson with Lipson Advocacy. You are also the director of the GCEE. I know that parents are going to be calling you straight away, and I know your phone is ringing all the time anyway. What do you find the families are coming to you most for?
Well, I think primarily because my favorite work has been around kids who are excluded from their neighborhood school. I receive a lot of calls about what I would call disciplinary exclusion. So where students are really struggling in school and the school then excludes them a variety of ways. So we have out of school suspension or moving placements or telling kids they can only go to school a half a day or calling mom and dad or a parent figure at lunch saying, come pick so-and-so up, but lots of different ways to exclude kids from school. And this is just always an enormous problem. Number one, of course, kids are getting less academic instruction. Number two, a lot of kids that people call me about are kids who really have trouble transitioning. So it's very confusing as the schedule changes over and over and over again. Number three, it can become reinforcing. School's really uncomfortable and hard, and then you get to stay home. If you break a certain rule, then and then also, there's a lot of stigma. So once you get a narrative about you in a school, it's hard to change that narrative. It's hard to convince people.
You know, it bothered me so much. Most recently, there was a news story about a child that was locked in a bathroom in an AU classroom, and the teachers, for one reason or another, these classrooms, we fought so hard to get cameras in classrooms. So that there's some sort of evidence-based that families can go back and find, and yet I feel like in some ways teachers know where the cameras are, so if anything happens, and I'm not saying that there are, for the majority, there are great teachers. There are teachers that were called to this profession because they truly do love it and they love their children and they really want to make a difference. But then there are teachers that get to a breaking point and something like this happens, and these cameras in the classrooms, I don't know. How do you feel about it, Leslie?
So I feel like the only real effort that I believe is effective in keeping kids safe is relationships. And so I've done a fair amount of abuse and neglect cases in public schools. And the best, when I say the best, I mean that students with disabilities are oftentimes not believed, just like adults with disabilities are not believed when they say I've been victimized, number one. Number two, as much as people aren't watching segregated classrooms, so where are segregated classrooms located, right, Gina? Where in the school building would you see segregated classrooms, typically?
Oh, they're down on the bottom
They're in the
level,
basement,
or they're all the way at the end of the hall.
in the end of the hall,
Yeah,
right, or they're in trailers, right?
yes.
So where would you want, if you did have segregated classrooms, I'm not a fan of them for a lot of reasons, but if you did have them, you'd want them in the center of the school. You'd want them next to the admins, like pod. You'd want them near where people pass by all the time. Sunshine is good. We want a lot of eyes on a lot of kids. The best work I've done is when other kids that schools are more likely to believe, or kids who are more verbal or whatever, say, that teacher's really mean to Johnny. And they say over and over and over again, that teacher's really mean to Johnny, or Johnny's always outside from the classroom. Then another mother calls another mother and says, you know, your kid's missing a lot of school because maybe Johnny can't come home and report it, or maybe the parents don't understand what he's saying or believe it. And that's typical. So number one, being in relationships with other kids without disabilities and having lots of eyes on you all day. What I've seen with the cameras is not only what you're saying. Obviously, there's always holes. But people don't watch the cameras as much as they're not watching the students. If a school administration is not allocating time to monitor and supervise segregated classrooms, what makes us think that they're going to take time to monitor and supervise and view cameras? I mean, the video footage. So I find it to be kind of a red herring, and I understand that we're seeking for safety desperately. Like I'm all in.
For sure. Well, kids are so vulnerable, especially the nonverbal
Exactly.
ones. Nonverbal children are, to me, the most vulnerable ones out there. And whether they're using a device or they haven't quite reached that stage yet, no one knows. And when you're a mom and then the teacher says, well, that kid spit on me, or that kid bit me, and there's not a camera, you only can go by what the teacher says. And yet you know that your son or daughter is not a biter, is not a spitter. It doesn't do that kind of stuff. And yet the school suspends them for 10 days, and there is truly no proof except for what the teacher says.
Agreed. Agreed. Especially,
is one of the cases that actually...
I believe you, and I believe you wholeheartedly. And I think one of the things to note is that if you're in a classroom with other kids who are verbal, meaning the kid's not segregated into a classroom of all kids who don't use a whole lot of words, then you have other kids that will be talking, because kids be talking.
Yes.
They be talking.
Yeah.
And so part of the danger is, and the other room, by the way, I agree with you, Gina, a room full of kids who are nonverbal, very, 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 very vulnerable. The other room is kids who either have a psychiatric disability or behavior disorders, because they don't believe those kids ever. Like, those kids are lying, they're drama, they're manipulative. So those classrooms also, I think they're also extremely vulnerable. Like, those are the two rooms that I think of as the most vulnerable. The three spaces the most vulnerable are buses, bathrooms that teachers don't go to the bathroom in, like they segregate bathrooms for some reason, like that people can't do their most basic business in the same space. I think is kind of weird. Like, if the bathroom's not clean, that it should be clean. So we like either single stall bathrooms or bathrooms that both teachers and kids go in, because if you remember back to your schooling, bathrooms are a very kind of Wild West place. And also, right? Don't tell me your stories, but I'd love to hear them another day.
Sorry, teachers.
Right. If you knew a teacher was going to come in there and go to the bathroom, you might have been you might have had hairspray. And
right.
And also locker rooms. So these are the places we know we need greater supervision. And those aren't places, by the way, that you have a lot of cameras.
I have learned so much today. I feel like I could talk to you forever. I think the biggest takeaways are, if you are in a Gnets school, we need to get you out of that Gnets school. And Leslie, I know you can help with that. Where can people find you?
So definitely take a look at the Georgia Coalition on Equity Education website. You can also just Google my name, Leslie Lipson, and find my website. I'm also on Facebook and LinkedIn and all the typical places.
Oh, thank you so much for being here, Leslie, today. I think you just opened the minds to a whole lot of people of what's going on right here in GA.
Well, thank you for having me and helping me raise people's consciousness, because we are better protectors when we know more. So thank you.
The big takeaway I got was it's really about the relationship, not just between the parent and the teacher or the child and the teacher, but the peer-to-peer relationships too, right? Because, if your child is in an AU classroom, but they're nonverbal, but there are verbal children in there, that can help determine whether Johnny actually bit the teacher or Susan actually punched the teacher, right? If there's not cameras in the classroom that make it pretty evident, right? So that relationship is so crucial. I didn't know about these Gnets until we did this show, and it makes my stomach sick to know that more than 3,000 children here in Georgia are still in the Gnets program. It's a program that's archaic, that needs to go. It should have never been to begin with. And I don't know how we need to stop this now, but we need to get on the horn with Brian Kemp. We need to get on the horn with our mayor, with our county officials, wherever these alternative schools and Gnet schools are, and these secluded classrooms, and just like get rid of them altogether. Our kids need to be in inclusive classrooms. We've seen the growth that happens, not just for the student themselves with a disability, but then their peers that aren't disabled. They have a better understanding, and then they can start to accept people with differences, right? That's a no-brainer. So whatever that means to you, if you didn't know about Gnets, start talking about it. Talk about it with other moms at the soccer field. Talk about it and get the word out that we need this program out of here. All right? Thank you so much. I mean, I'm a little passionate right now. I'm a little bit worked up. I'm a little emotional, too, to think that kids of color, that 3,000 of them are stuck in these programs. What the? Never mind. We'll table this for another time, right? I am Gina. Thank you so much for checking out Life with the Spectrum. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe, send this episode to other people that you might think have a son or daughter in the Gnets program. It's just that important that we get rid of it like yesterday, right? And until next time, we live life with the Spectrum. See ya.
Bye.